I'm sure you all have seen or heard of the video that went viral last year of a concert where the musician thought that there was a lady standing beside the stage dancing. What this man was unaware of, though, was that this lady was an American Sign Language interpreter. The question here is, was this lady actually doing a good job, since people thought that she was dancing instead of interpreting? My purpose today is to tell you exactly what makes a good American Sign Language interpreter. I'm first going to tell you about a few of the jobs American Sign Language interpreters are used for. Then, the things an interpreter needs to be aware of when on the job. And finally, I'm going to show you what a good American Sign Language interpreter looks like. The past 2 years, I've taken an American Sign Language course where I learned a lot about how the deaf community functions in a world where we're speaking all the time. On a special college visit with my class, I learned something that I hadn't thought about before. In a hospital or a doctor's office, there are people that speak a foreign language that need an interpreter, but the deaf need one too. For me, personally, I hadn't thought about sign language interpreters being needed in a hospital or doctor's office before. According to an article published by Chad Ettinger, out of an estimated 250 to 300 million deaf people in the world, only 2% of them are Christians. Not only does the fact that people don't know how to communicate with the deaf play a part in this, but not having interpreters in churches is a huge part of the struggle. In my church, we have an interpreter who does her best to bring in deaf people so that they can see the gospel. I only know of a few churches that have interpreters, but this is one of the places that we need them the most so that they can reach the deaf where we don't know how to reach them. When we go to an event where there is a speaker, we'll often see somebody standing beside the stage making a bunch of funny movements with their hands. We grew to realize that these were American Sign Language interpreters. When we think about American Sign Language interpreter, we often picture them in these environments. Though the task of translating a speech can seem easy, it's actually a lot more difficult than we realize. Not only does the interpreter have to stay caught up with what the speaker is saying, but they have to sign clear enough for somebody to understand what they're signing. Could you imagine if you had to translate every word that I was saying right now? These are all really important jobs that are often looked over as areas where there is a need for interpreters. It's important as an interpreter to be aware of several things though when interpreting. When interpreting, certain clothing and accessories can become a huge distraction. Imagine if I was speaking to you and there was a concert going on right beside us. That would make it really hard to pay attention to what I'm saying. The same thing happens when an interpreter wears things like a necklace, earrings, or has patterned clothing. Anything that could take the attention of the deaf person away from the hands of the interpreter could cause the deaf person to miss things that the interpreter is signing. When interpreting, they should always try to have plain, long-sleeve shirts on, no accessories, and have their hair pulled back. Most of the time, whenever you're listening to a professional speaker, they have a wall behind them. Now, in some cases, this is not always practical, but it's something that all interpreters work to have. As with clothing, having things going on behind the interpreter can cause a distraction to the deaf people watching them. According to an article by Dr. Bill Vickers, in American Sign Language, facial expressions are a huge part of communication. The facial expressions you make while doing a sign can affect the meaning of that sign. In speaking, we have inflections in our voices to show what we mean. In the English language, one word can have several different meanings depending on the tone of our voices. The same thing happens in sign language. As a deaf person, they obviously can't hear the tone of our voices, so an interpreter needs to be very expressive with their face and their hands so that they can get their message across properly. For example, this is a sign for bathroom. If I made the sign with my head tilted forward and my eyebrows down, I'm asking if you need to use the bathroom. But if I made the sign with my head up and my eyebrows raised, I'm saying that I need to use the bathroom. To know what makes an interpreter good is nice, but to see one is amazing.
The storm's here. Hurricane Irma is now impacting our state. Southeast Florida is already experiencing tropical storm force winds, and nearly 25,000 people have already lost power. Hurricane Irma is beginning to batter the Florida Keys with dangerous winds and continues to remain a catastrophic and life-threatening Category 4 storm with winds of 130 miles per hour. This is a deadly storm, and our state has never seen anything like it. The threat of significant storm surge flooding along the entire west coast of Florida has increased. And 6 to 12 feet, think about that, 6 to 12 feet of impacts above ground level is now probable. 6 to 12 feet, this will cover your house. Evacuations are in place across the state. More than 5.6 million Floridians have been ordered to evacuate. You need to listen to local evacuation orders.
According to a 2017 article published through the British Broadcasting Channel, the most powerful Atlantic storm in a decade has left a trail of destruction in the Caribbean, affecting an estimated 1.2 million people. Something I often wonder is how many more people could have been affected by storms like this if we didn't have people like this man that stepped up to become American Sign Language interpreters. In this video, there are quite a lot of funny expressions this man used. The first time I watched this video, I was laughing a lot at the end. What I didn't understand was that these expressions this man used were exactly what were supposed to be used. Whenever we speak, we express a sense of emergency with our voices. But a hurricane as devastating as Irma needed to be expressed by this man with his hands and his face, which he did an amazing job at. To conclude, today I told you about a few of the jobs American Sign Language interpreters are used for. Then I told you about a few of the things a person needs to be aware of when interpreting. And finally, I showed you what a good American Sign Language interpreter looks like. These are just a few of the things that make a good American Sign Language interpreter. At the beginning of my speech, I asked if the lady interpreting at the concert actually did a good job as an interpreter. From her point, she did an amazing job being very expressive and excited throughout the whole thing.